Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia, here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 4 new reviews for you folks at home. Episode number 233 of the show, and this week's reviews are going to include The Heroic Villain, book number 3, the final book in this particular series arc. Also the Boneless Dungeon, Rebirth is the next one. After that will be Underworld, Vampire Gate, a LitRPG series. And last but not least, definitely, is going to be Battleborne. So 4 titles for you this week. Before we go into any of those reviews, of course, we got some LitRPG news for you. And in LitRPG news, we got a couple of stories for you. First one is going to be for the Realms boxed set. The author, C.M. Carney, is actually doing a nice sale for both of them. The second box set came out recently, and to celebrate, he's putting them both on sale. And that's going to include both box sets at the price point of $2.99 each. So up until July the 4th. 2020. So there you go. So $2.99 each, and each set includes 3 books. And they're definitely worth the price. I got to tell you that if you haven't purchased them, go do it. They also are all in Kindle Unlimited, so you can feel free to read through them on that program as well. And you're definitely going to get a really good bang for your buck here. In other LitRPG news, just a quick reminder that the audiobook for The Mechanical Crafter, which I wrote, is out for you to enjoy. It's a super enjoyable novel. It's crafting a non-human main character named Repair. There is the good story here, good adventure. Some interesting emotional journeys I won't spoil for anybody. And not only is it available in ebook, but it's out as an audiobook. I'm going to play a little bit of a sample for you just so you can listen to it. And if you like it, please go purchase it and go listen to it. And please leave a review if you enjoy it.
As the dark faded, a light in the distance grew slowly brighter and brighter until it filled my vision. There was a cacophony of voices, and while none were quite in focus yet, I recognized the blurry shapes of people moving all around me, along with tables, chairs, walls, and a window in the background. I wished that I could see better, and like magic, words appeared in front of me. Readjusting visual centers. There was a small whirring noise inside my head, and the room came into focus. The people talking were wearing white lab coats and excitedly gesturing toward me. I was confused as I realized just how short the people were. They only came up to my waist and had heads that were just a bit too large for their bodies, with larger than healthy ears and bulbous noses. The word gnomes floated to mind, and I realized that was exactly what they were. Their speech seemed like some foreign language at first, but their words slowly started to make sense, and I realized that I somehow recognized it. A gnome with bright red hair and a handlebar mustache gestured toward me.
See, I told you that it would work. Instead of creating a new artificial soul, the ancients must have bound an old one to their machines to make the metalmen. Yes, your technique has worked, but just because it lives doesn't mean it is the same techniques the ancients used.
Another gnome, one with black, slicked-back hair, countered. A third gnome, just out of sight, said,
We haven't even tested the metal man to see if it's sentient. It may be as unintelligent as all the normal constructs.
And there we go. Okay, thanks for taking the time to listen to that. We'll have a link in the show notes for the audiobook if you want to go check it out. I appreciate you and supporting the writing we do and the podcast in this way. On to stuff that is out now, stuff that has come out recently. I haven't had a chance to read it, but it is out for you to enjoy, and that includes Respawn, the 5th book in the Respawn series, called Blade of the Ancients. Also, the 4th book in the Sky Realms Online series called Green Fire is out for you to enjoy. League of Losers is technically just coming out this last week. We did an early review for it. It is out for you to enjoy officially now. Also out is The God's Game Volume 3. in that particular series out for you to enjoy. The ninth book, man, 9 books in the System Apocalypse series. Everyone has always been entertaining. I think I missed the last one, so I haven't read that one or this one, but everybody seems to love them. And I love them. I've enjoyed them immensely. Tao Wong's story. This one's called Stars Asunder. On also out is Reincarnation, Last Born of the Kidorth. There you go. And Battleborne is out as well. I should actually have that out if I'm reviewing it, so there you go. Orc Spawn Betrayal is out for you to enjoy, as is the 3rd volume in the Tales of Dungeon series, which is a dungeon core short story anthology, edited by Jeffrey Falkenlogue, who's the author of the Slime Dungeon Chronicles. Also out is Source Gate. Let's see, also Beastborn, Mark the Founder, which seems to be pretty popular. So there you go. And Cinnamon Bun, which is looks like it's a quirky literary story. So there you go. On to new stuff that is out for audiobook listeners. That includes Beast Queen, the 2nd book in the Monster Slayers Online series, Noah in the Flesh, which is the 3rd book in the World of Change series, which is it's a very interesting kind of quirky, post-apocalyptic, overpowered main character kind of story from Vasily Mahenko. Also out is the 3rd book in the Dragonheart series called Blood Will. The Skyrim's Online book number 4, which is up as an ebook, is out also as an audiobook at the same time. Clan Dominance, the Sleepless Ones book number 1 is out for you. Remember, this is a kind of a relaunch for that particular series, new translations, new cover art, different publisher if I'm mistaken. So go enjoy it. I think the audiobook is different as well. Silver and Fox, the Western Hero, book number 1 in that series, the LitRPG Wuxia story, is out as an audiobook. A lot of people really enjoy the action and cultivation stuff here. On to upcoming LitRPG stuff that announced in the near future. Just me reading off more stuff. Mind Games is out on July the 7th. July the 6th. July the 7th, it'll be Path of Darkness, Project Chrysalis, book number 6. July the 7th, it'll be Redemption, a LitRPG space adventure, The Last Enclave, book number 2. On July the 8th, it'll be The Enchanters, Project Stellar, book number 2. On July the 9th, Legends Online, book number 6. On July the 14th, Watcher's Question, book number 2 in the Life in Exile series. July the 14th, The Alchemist, book number 2. July the 15th, 4 Hex is out on July 15th. The 2nd book in the Eternal Online series will be out, called The Ruined Temple, on July the 28th. On July 31st, it'll be the 1st book of the Vindication 2.0 series called Arrow of Justice. The 4th book in the Space Season series will be out on July 31st. August the 4th will be The World of the Undead Force. On later on the month, it'll be Lord of the Dead, The Eternal Journey, book number 2. August the 8th, it'll be War of the Posers, The Bad Guy series, book number 4. On August the 11th, it'll be The Heavenly Throne, book number 2, called The Weight of the Force. August the 18th, it'll be Intellectium, the 1st book in that series. August 23rd, The System Multiverse, book number 2. August 27th, it'll be Small Unit Tactics, volume number 1. The 5th book in the Discardium series will be out on September the 4th. September the 9th, it'll be Dungeon Worlds on later in the month. I forgot to put that release dates for some of these. It'll be Sovereigns, so that'll be out before October the 2nd, rather. On October the 2nd, it'll be Dungeon Crawler Carl, by Matt Dinneman, author of The Battlefield Sergeant. On October the 6th, it'll be the 3rd book in the Life in Exile series called Watcher's Fate. October the 7th, it'll be the 1st book in the City of Goblin series. And October 26th, it'll be the Otherworld Underdog book number 4, which has always been an entertaining series. On to new releases and reviews. And up first for this week's review is going to be The Heroic Villain, book number 3, written by Charles Dean. This is 383 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. After a night of drunken debauchery, following the defeat of the Academy's headmistress, Lucas awakens to trouble on all fronts. The steady balance of power within the Imperium has been shaken by his presence, and the resulting afterflow is a town full of heavily armed and well-staffed enemies that seek Lucas's death. Lucas must not only survive their assault, but also manage his own slowly crumbling internal affairs when his party begins to fracture. Angered by Lucas's increasingly selfish actions, some of his closest allies are tempted to turn against him. Follow our protagonist while he tries to grow his influence within the Empire, survive the daggers in his back from Imperium traitors, and restore the relationship he truly wants with the woman he has slowly fallen in love with in this epic LitRPG adventure from Charles Dean. So there you go. Full disclosure, I received an advanced copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This novel delivers exactly what it's promised. It's actually the end of the first arc in the series. I don't know if the author is actually going to continue on with it. Kind of depends on sales. But this is actually a nice little conclusion. He wraps up all the things he wanted to in the story, caps off that relationship issue in there as well. And I think it delivers a nice ending. I might slightly be biased. I think there's a character in there named after me. A lot of RPG authors will just drop little name drops for the podcast because they like the show, which I always appreciate. But this has always been a very well written, well thought out, entertaining story. I like the first book in the series. I think the very best just because it touched on some really interesting themes. But the series, as it's continued, has expanded the cast, expanded kind of the scope of the story, and this one does a nice, satisfying ending for a lot of the series fans of kind of capping things off. There's good action, adventure, character development galore. The only thing I kind of wanted was more story. I actually thought that this felt a little short. I mean, it's still like almost 400 pages, but the story felt like, oh, there is going to be more. And it has a good solid ending. I was expecting, I guess, maybe a little more world exploration in the series, something along those lines. But this has a nice, good ending. Not as good. Not as, of course, expansive as I wanted, but still, that's one of the things. Like, you want a series to continue sometimes, where you're just like, "Oh, this is so fun. Why does it have to end?" And that's kind of what it is. The score on this review is going to be 7.4 out of 10. The heroic villain is kind of coming in for now, apparently. So that's the heroic villain, book number 3 with the score of 7.4 out of 10. And next up, we have the Boneless Dungeon Rebirth, written by Devin Osplund. It is 204 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. In a world of sword and sorcery, Breck died and was reborn as a dungeon core, a specialized living gem in charge of creating and managing a dungeon. Unlike most dungeons, he was handicapped with the inability to create bones, the very building blocks that comprise most living creatures. Breck just wants his life back, his humanity, and will do whatever it takes to achieve his goal, even if that means killing the hordes of adventurers that want to plunder his depths so he can gain the power to transcend. Zack, a new adventurer, is given the quest to find the source of the new cosmic energy that has made itself known, the same cosmic energy that creates dungeon cores. It's the lucky break he's been waiting for his whole life, but he'll face opposition that will see him dead before they let him complete his quest. Despite his inability to create monsters with bones, can Breck gain enough essence to rank up and become a human again, or will he be forever trapped as a dungeon? Will Zack be able to live long enough to complete his quest while the other guild members are hunting him? What happens when Zack's and Breck's paths collide? Find out in all this and more in this exciting game, the LitRPG Dungeon Rebirth. So there we go. This is actually 2 stories that feel very separate for the most part, up until like a late stage in the story. One and the time in the story is actually split equally between them. One for the dungeon core, one for the adventure, which is in the novel description. And the game mechanics in the story are fairly limited. So it is more gamelet than it is LitRPG, being limited to essence ranks, maybe some adventurer ranks, and a kind of a soft cultivation system. Okay, on the dungeon side of things, the story starts out a little bit slow, with a little too much time, in my opinion, explaining how the core can extend its essence just a few inches from its tiny core. And one of the things, I guess, in the dungeon core part that kind of bothered me a little bit was just how the main character in the story kind of had to be told everything. It's one of those things that made the progression on his behalf feel guided. And whether that's the intention of the author or not, it kind of it kind of lowered my enjoyment, just because I would rather have seen the core kind of discover things on its own, instead of always having this, I don't want to say AI companion, but this a companion who is kind of just info dumping on him most of the time. And then he's like, oh, okay, what do I do now? And the companion does the next thing. And he's like, well, okay, what do I do now? And it's not like that he didn't do it and do some experimentation on his own, but a lot of that early section just felt a little slower and not driven by the main character's choices in itself. And that was just something that kind of drew some enjoyment away from me, unfortunately. And then this is kind of especially just a little bit annoying because the main character and how it's set up is an intelligent character. He's not from this world initially. He's from our world, actually a future world from ours, where like the Earth is overcrowded and stuff. And his backstory is kind of as he's really good at analyzing data. He works for a big corporation and he helps, figure out stocks and he makes a better percentage than anyone else. And so it seems like he's intelligent, but is also decently educated. And none of that really seemed to translate once he was kind of reborn. Like, and it's not like he didn't retain his old memories. He knew he was going to human. He knew he was from a different world. He had his memories, but none of that kind of was used. So it felt a lot more like a blank slate with his actions, but his backstory suggests it should be otherwise. Still, small thing for me. Also, the dungeon core theme is supposed to be boneless dungeon core, but it kind of defaults to insects from most of the story. And I was a little disappointed with that just because there are a lot of other boneless creatures in the world, even the natural world. And I understand why it defaults to insects because of the local terrain in where the dungeon is at. But I've read other dungeon core stories with insects as a theme, and so it didn't feel particularly fresh to me. If you haven't read that theme before, this is probably going to land a little bit better for you because it'll feel more different. And again, just the pacing in the beginning part is a little bit slow because you don't get your first fight till you're already 20% of the novel, and you don't get your first aspect of the dungeon creation stuff until you're almost a third of the way through. So again, kind of a slow start. The other half of the story is about a noob adventurer, which is not a bad setup for the story. It does provide an opportunity to see some world building done in the larger world because of course the dungeon core itself is a static entity. And that's not uncommon in a lot of dungeon core stories. Here, some of the plotline with that noob adventure felt a little bit forced. And I think I've mentioned this about some of the author's writings before. Like the plot lines feel forced. As a writer, I'm like, I understand that you're plotting a story and you have where you want your character to go. But as a reader, when I see the strings, and I'm like, oh, you're going to do a thing like that. And he did exactly what I thought he was going to do. That sometimes lessens my into it because it feels like you're forcing the character in a particular direction instead of, I don't know, letting them do it naturally, or at least making me feel like it's a natural choice for the story path. So one of the bigger issues here was for me kind of the guild conflict in the story, where the other members of the character, this is something that's in all descriptions, so it's not spoilery, are looking to murder the main character because he has this rare quest. Unbeknownst to him to find the dungeon, essentially. And it just didn't make sense to me why they would want to kill him for that, because they wouldn't give him the quest, and nobody knows in advance that it's going to be a dungeon, and the story is kind of set up where, like, he can just group with whoever he wants to, and they would all kind of get rewarded for that particular quest. As a matter of fact, that's something that he does in the story. So it kind of never made sense to me. And I get why it exists, to create conflict and a reason and a motivation for the main character kind of hurry and do his thing. But it just kind of like, again, felt a little bit forced as like the setup for that quest in the first place. But there are good aspects to that story. Again, the author does a pretty decent job of doing some world building, especially with a particular race that's shown off into the story. I'm trying to spoil it. I liked that backstory and that world building that was done there. And even though the two storylines do exist in the same world, they actually don't cross until like the very end of the story. And even then, it's super brief, which is I was a little disappointed. I was really expecting them to come across each other a lot sooner, because the way it's set up now, it almost feels like they could have been different novels, and just kind of had a small crossover event. And they just didn't feel connected until again near the end, which is when that happens. Overall, Not a poorly written story. Technical writing levels is fine. It has its funny moments, and again, I like the world building here a little bit. But overall, it just didn't kind of click for me. I read a lot of Dungeon Core stories. I think that might be influencing what I'm feeling here for this one, just because I've seen the insect theme before. And while the author is probably going to expand his bonus dungeon kind of theme to something, other things that are different later in the series, that's kind of what it is here. And so I didn't really feel like it brought something new and, super amazing or different to the genre. And the adventure side of this kind of barely interacted with the Dungeon Core dungeon at all. And so that's why I came for the show. It wasn't for just a regular fan, slice of life adventure story. I thought this is going to be mostly Dungeon Core with some interaction with the outside world through this adventurer line. And it kind of turned into two different stories that kind of existed in the same novel. Dungeon Core on its own, adventurer side on its own, and eventually they meet for a super brief period, and I was like, oh, that's okay, I get, it's fine, I guess. But it didn't really connect for me. So for me, it's a score of 6 out of 10. Again, didn't quite work for me, but you might enjoy it, especially if you haven't read a Dungeon Core story with a insect theme before. It'll feel a little fresher for you. But for me, the Boneless Dungeon Rebirth gets a score of 6 out of 10. And next we have Underworld Vampire Brigade, a LitRPG series, book number 6 in the Underworld series, written by Apollo Thorne. It is 263 pages, $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. I actually think it's a little longer than 263. I felt like it was more like $350. But here's the author's description. After surviving Mistress Nava's wrath, Lorraine is banished from the sanctuary and everything he holds dear. He finds himself on an impossible quest to retrieve something from Laura Darius's vault for the headmistress in hopes of bringing everyone back together. And that is absolutely kind of the setup for what happens here. So there you go. Full disclosure, I received Advanced Map review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This is always a fun series for me. Like, I never really have ever had a bad time with this story or this author or this series in general. This particular series is very slice of life. And a lot of it is just like this slice of life adventuring through the underworld, hence the name of the series, with action and adventure being like the big keys. And this one is really no different. This one actually is a little more of a setup where the main character is leveling up to go on that final quest that is talked about in the novel description. So a lot of the story is just kicking butts, fighting monsters, powering up your levels. There is an added dimension to the RPG progression with a touch of cultivation in this particular novel. And it's just like an easy series, an easy novel to just sit back, binge, and enjoy. It's like watching a really nice action movie with RPG mechanics and monsters and fighting and vampires and a lich companion. So it's not like an RPG action movie you've ever seen, but it's a good one. It really is. Again, there's not a lot of plot development here. Like I said, it's really just set up for like the next big arc. Where he's finally fulfilling that quest line that he was offered such a long time ago. That doesn't mean there's only action in the story. There is good power progression, magical theorizing, character development for the main character because it's a smaller story with like only 3 characters mostly focused on for most of it. For not just the main character, but also for the side characters that are in that particular group. And there's just a surprisingly interesting lich that joins the group that I was surprised at how much I liked. He doesn't seem that interesting in the previous book where he was first introduced, but in this one, it's just like, oh, this is actually a really interesting character. I like the perspective that he brings and kind of the tone to moderate the other 2 characters. So good character. It's a really enjoyable read. If you're into a slice of life, action, adventure, this is a must read for you. For me, it gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's Underworld Vampire Brigade. Really enjoyed it with a score of 7.7 out of 10. Next, we have Battleborne by Dave Wilmar. This is an entirely new series for the author of the Greystone Chronicles, and he's done a bunch of stuff. So that's just probably one of the earlier ones he's done. It is 428 pages, $3.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Max was a professional soldier and extremely good at his job, right until it killed him. At the moment of his death, he meets Hildi the Valkyrie and is given 3 options: serve Odin in Valhalla as one of the I'm not going to say that word, fighting each day and celebrating each night until the Battle of Ragnarok. Except his, oh man, I think he wrote this way just because he's expecting me to read it. And there's little things that are throwing me off. 2, accept his death as final and end his existence. Or 3, be reincarnated as a Battleborne on a random unknown world. Max chooses to gamble, to live a new life, whatever that might entail. Favored with the blessing of the Valkyries, who gift him with an unusual bloodline, he's reborn on a world of magic and monsters. In fact, his own new body is half monster. Thrust into the world with nothing but a canvas diaper, sharp teeth and claws, Max must use his skills as a soldier to improvise and survive. There are no respawns, and at level 0, nearly anything can kill him. With his new status as one of the Battleborn, much is expected of Max. Dangerous and difficult quests are presented to him, and the loot ranges from filthy goblin loincloths to epic weapons. Join Max as he learns to navigate his new life, struggling with the instincts of his monster bloodline and taking advantage of them at the same time. Whew. Okay. The full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. I've always enjoyed everything that the author has written. Dave Wormuth has never produced a story that I haven't enjoyed, and they're all slightly different. This is a new story, and this is no different. It doesn't disappoint. It's full of action and adventure with the main character that isn't a boring human, at least not fully. The main character chooses to reincarnate instead of going to Valhalla after dying in our world, and is transported to a new fantasy RPG world where he is given a uniquely powerful body that's a mix of several races, including some monsters. From there, it's an action fest with him killing monsters left and right and learning an interesting mix of spells and skills that let him overpower higher level enemies. Like all the other stories, the game mechanics are well thought out and applied to the entire story. That has never been an issue, honestly, with any story Dave Wormuth has written. Everything has always had the RPG aspects really tightly wound up with the story. There is a little bit of crafting in this story, also kingdom building, which is kind of a theme for, I think, everything he's written. Different has some kingdom building. He really seems to enjoy that. But the big draw is gonna be the fights. Like, this is really probably the most heavily action oriented story that the author's written. And there are some other aspects, of course, like kingdom building, crafting, and character development. I like the world building that exists here. There are 3 main races that are explored in this particular story, and I like the interactive world building between them that was done for, like, fleshing out their history enough so that the conflicts in the story kind of make sense. And there are some good side character moments. I won't say what moments those are, but I was happily surprised that the authors were willing to do them for characters he developed. And it's like, oh, didn't see that coming. Good for you, man. Overall, it was such a good story. I almost read the entire thing in a single. So I think at one point I was like, it's 3 a.m. and I'm like, I can't finish this. I have to sleep my eyes. I have to do stuff tomorrow. And so I had to put it down, but I read it immediately afterwards when I woke up the next morning. And I really look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the near future. So also bonus points for the Fibble cameo. So it made me laugh out loud. So it gets me a score 7.8 out of 10. Battleborne. Like I said, really, really quite enjoyable and entertaining. Really good story. That's Battleborne. The score is 7.8 out of 10. Okay, folks, that is it. The show is over. We're done with all the reviews. Thanks a lot for listening, for watching. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our website at LitRPGpodcast.com, and all the other Facebook pages we have linked in the show notes for places you can hang out with authors, hang out with readers of this genre that we seem to love. And of course, if you want to support the podcast anyway, you should inform about all the ways you do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And of course, this week, if you want to support us, purchase that book I wrote, the Mechanical Crafter. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's really crunchy. And book number 2 should be out in July sometime. I'm finishing editing now on it. So it should be out in July sometime. So you don't have a long time to wait for the second book. For book 3, you might wait a little bit. Haven't started writing it. But book 2 should be out relatively soon. So go enjoy book 1 so you can catch up on book 2 when it comes out. So thanks a lot for hanging out with me today, folks. And until we can hang out again, remember to read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.